An officer stood wedged between my truck and a tow truck steel cable, one hand up, telling the driver to stop. Behind him, a woman in a visor and gardening gloves was insisting my truck needed to be removed immediately. The tow driver looked confused. The officer looked calm. And I stood on my own driveway, holding the one piece of paper that was about to change how this morning ended. Nobody there knew what was in that paper. Not the HOA president. Not the officer. Not the tow driver, who was just trying to do his job. All they knew was that a woman named Denise had called this in as an emergency, insisting my truck was illegally parked on HOA-controlled property and needed to go before I could hide the evidence. I wasn't hiding anything. I was standing on my own property, holding a survey document my father had kept for 11 years. And, in about 10 minutes, that document was going to end this whole situation in a way nobody standing there expected. How did it get here? A truck, a driveway, a woman with a clipboard and a grudge. Let's back up. My name doesn't matter much for this story, so I'll just say I'm a homeowner in a quiet subdivision in the Midwest, the kind with matching mailboxes and a community pool nobody uses in October. I bought my house 2 years ago from my father, who built it when the neighborhood was brand new. The driveway, the strip of grass beside it, and about 4 feet of gravel shoulder near the mailbox were all part of the original lot, clearly marked on the deed and county survey. That gravel shoulder is where I usually park my work truck, a full-size pickup I use for my contracting business. It's never blocked the road. It's never blocked a neighbor's view. It's been sitting in that exact spot since before I even moved in. Enter Denise, the HOA board president, 3 houses down. Denise had been on the board for about a year, and in that year, she developed a reputation for treating suggestions as laws and laws as suggestions, whichever worked better for her that week. She'd sent people warning letters over trash cans left out an hour too long. She'd once tried to fine a family for a seasonal decoration violation over a wreath in July. When I moved in, Denise introduced herself with a smile and a comment about how my truck wasn't really the neighborhood aesthetic. I laughed it off. I shouldn't have. Over the following months, the comments turned into notes on my door. The notes turned into a formal warning letter citing a vehicle parking rule that, as far as I could tell, didn't actually exist in our HOA's governing documents. I checked. Twice. I want to be clear about something before this story goes further. This wasn't a shared driveway. It wasn't common area. It wasn't even close to the property line. It was mine fully on paper and had been for over a decade. Denise, however, seemed to believe that HOA authority extended to wherever she felt like it should. It was a Saturday morning when Denise showed up at my door holding a folder like it was a legal filing. "Your truck is in violation," she said, before I'd even said good morning. Section 4, subsection C. Commercial vehicles aren't permitted in resident visible areas. I asked her to show me that section. She flipped through her folder, paused, then said the rule was under review, but effectively in place. I told her calmly that a rule under review isn't a rule at all, and the truck was parked on my property, not community land. She wasn't interested in that distinction. "It doesn't matter whose property it's on if it affects the neighborhood's appearance," she said. "That's not how deeds work, and it's not how HOA authority works either, but I didn't want a shouting match on a Saturday morning. So I just said I'd look into it and left it there." She didn't leave it there. 2 days later, an official-looking violation notice appeared on my door, threatening a $150 fine and warning the vehicle could be towed at my expense. I called the HOA management company listed on the notice. The woman on the phone sounded almost apologetic. She said she had no record of a commercial vehicle restriction in the current bylaws, and that the notice hadn't gone through the normal review process. She said she'd flag it. Denise apparently didn't wait for anything to be flagged. The next morning, I woke up to a tow truck idling at the end of my driveway, and Denise standing beside it with her arms crossed, looking like she just won something. "I told you," she said. "This ends today." I asked the tow driver if he had a work order. He hesitated, then admitted Denise had called it in herself, claiming to have board authority to request the tow. "Does this sound like someone enforcing a rule to you, or someone on a bit of a power trip? Let me know what you think in the comments." I told the driver calmly that the vehicle was on private property, not HOA property, and that towing it without my consent could be a serious problem for him, not just for Denise. He looked uneasy. Denise told him to ignore me and hook up the truck. That's when I called the police. Not out of anger, out of necessity. For a few minutes, things went quiet. The tow driver stepped back, said he wanted to wait for an officer before doing anything further, and Denise, visibly annoyed, went to go get her paperwork from her house. I stood in the driveway, coffee in hand, and for a moment it almost felt over. Maybe she'd come back with nothing. Maybe this would just fizzle out like a lot of HOA disputes do, with an unspoken agreement to never mention it again. But something in the way she'd said, "I told you," stuck with me. This wasn't someone backing down. This was someone buying time. The officer arrived about 10 minutes later, calm and unhurried, the way good officers usually are. Denise reappeared almost instantly, folder in hand, talking before he'd even gotten out of the car. She told him the truck was an unauthorized commercial vehicle, that I'd ignored multiple official warnings, and that she had board authority to have it removed. She used the word illegally 3 times in under a minute. The officer listened patiently, then turned to me and asked for my side. I explained the situation simply. My property, my deed, no valid rule cited, and a tow ordered without my consent. Have you ever seen police get called out over something this small? It happens more than people think. He asked to see documentation from both of us. Denise produced her folder. I went inside and grabbed the one thing I hadn't needed until now. I handed the officer the property survey and deed, clearly showing the driveway and gravel shoulder as part of my lot, with the property line ending well past where the truck was parked. The officer reviewed it, then asked Denise to show him the specific HOA bylaw she was citing. She flipped through her folder again, insisting the rule existed, that it was standard practice, that the board had informally approved it. The officer asked a simple question. Is this rule in the recorded governing documents, yes or no? Denise didn't answer directly. She said it was in progress. He asked again. Still no clear answer. At that point, the tow driver quietly unhooked his cable and said he wasn't comfortable proceeding without a valid order. The officer's conclusion was calm and unambiguous. Without a valid, recorded rule, and with clear documentation showing the vehicle was on private property, there was no legal basis for a tow, and any attempt to remove the vehicle without my consent could expose the person ordering it to liability. He told Denise, professionally but firmly, that HOA boards don't have authority to enforce rules that haven't been properly adopted, and that she should direct future concerns through the management company, not by personally arranging tows. Do you think Denise expected it to end this way, or did she really believe she had the authority she claimed? Denise didn't say much after that. She picked up her folder and walked back toward her house without another word. A few days later, I received a formal letter from the HOA management company confirming that no such parking restriction existed, and that the violation notice and fine were being rescinded. I didn't file a complaint against Denise. I didn't feel the need to. The board quietly began requiring documented approval before future violation notices could go out, which told me I wasn't the only one she'd been doing this to. My truck still sits in the same spot. Nothing about my property changed. What changed was that a rule enforced by intimidation ran into a rule enforced by paperwork, and paperwork won. If there's one thing this whole experience taught me, it's that confidence isn't the same as authority. Denise was confident. She just wasn't right. If you've made it this far, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this one, consider liking the video and subscribing for more stories like this one. Drop a comment and let me know what you thought. And if you've had your own run-in with an HOA overstepping its bounds, I'd genuinely like to hear about it in the comments below.